My name is Gina Griffiths. I'm the program director for a nonprofit up in Scottsdale called STARS. And we have day program services and employment services, transition services, and a new autism program.
And I'm Janet Holt. I am the director of special education in Cave Creek School District.
So, and you'll understand why we're doing this together, because that seems random probably. So what I mean, oh, and the first, we're here to talk about employment first, and that's our fabulously beautiful logo that was designed in this building. And it was specifically designed with the Arizona state flag colors. That's a big important, yeah. And so Don works with Janet and Mary Margaret is a parent. It's just that. So first, yes, I brought a whole big stack of them, and then I want to take extra for people because it's so exciting. So why employment first? I don't know if any of you, has anyone heard employment first like as a concept at all, or is this brand new? Good, I'm glad to hear that. Employment, we're pushing towards employment first so that employment in the community will be the first and primary outcome for all individuals, no matter what, whether they have any sort of disability or not. We're not saying employment only. The intent is not to eliminate any other services and only offer employment, but that it is our primary goal, starting with itty bitty kiddos to adults, that we start talking to them about employment. When we talk about employment, we mean working in the community alongside non-disabled peers for competitive wages. And we haven't had this conversation. Some people find it weird because I'm from a provider agency that I'm part of all of this. And there are a lot of providers involved, and some people find that odd because I have facility-based employment and supported employment and the service spectrum that we provide, but we really, that's just the system that is. We all know that we can have a system that's better, and that's why we're involved in it, even though some people think we might be shooting off on people, but we're not. Most of us as providers are very, very excited. We also really want to educate people that we hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear it a lot in the school setting. Individuals are afraid to work because of the benefit. They're afraid of the impact of their benefits. But when individuals are on benefits, they're living at poverty level. And if they work, they can move beyond poverty level. And there are a lot of amazing resources to help them, and that's going to be on another slide, to understand what benefits, how their benefits will be impacted by the work that they do. So it's also a matter of trying to overall get the folks that we work with to be involved in the community. And individuals that do work in the community tend to have more community engagement in other arenas besides work. So overall, we know it's what's going to be best, but then I went the wrong direction. So in addition to all of that, which is kind of the ethical and moral reasons that we all know it's right, there's also a matter of the fact that we don't have much choice. It's coming. So hi, we just started. I'm glad you came. Have a hand up. So there are a lot of things happening on a federal level. There have been some Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits that have happened. And the Department of Justice filed a suit in Rhode Island, and they had a huge settlement that was related to the Olmstead Act and individuals' access to the community through employment services. These rulings are focused on people not being in sheltered workshops or facility-based work centers, if they're not fully engaged in the community. And I personally, probably because I'm a provider, think that in Arizona we do a good job at trying to look at individual needs. And within our agency and a lot of the agencies I know, least restrictive environments a school term, but that's part of our consideration. We want people to be as independent as they possibly can. There are states that really weren't doing that, which has gotten the Department of Justice involved in a lot of other states. CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, when it talks about Medicaid regulations, which funds all of the services that are provided after an individual leaves school, is changing their requirements as well. We're transitioning to kind of a new service spectrum. It's going to be a long-term transition that is eventually only going to fund employment in the community. Other day services, but not that supported employment model that we're so used to looking at. So we're moving away from it through CMS. The new WIOA Act that came out last year, as that gets implemented, has a bigger focus on transitioning kids into employment settings, partnering school districts and all of the resources to make sure we're getting the right transition services in place. So those are all things that have happened at the federal level that are pushing this. As a state in Arizona, we're trying to define our own plan and get on board before someone comes to us and says, this is what you have to do, and then we won't have any control in how we do it. The National Governors Association has also issued a blueprint for governors that is a model moving towards employment for states. The Department of Labor is consistently looking at sub-minimum wage and if that's even going to remain an option for individuals. In Arizona, we have a Promise grant promoting the readiness of minors in Social Security, where they're looking at individuals in the ages of 16 to mid-20s, and what the different resources they have access to and how that impacts their outcomes. And then hopefully people are aware of the ABLE Act, which is a new bit of federal legislation that allows for individuals with special needs to put money into savings accounts over and above that $2,000 limit that currently would get them kicked off their benefits. So in Arizona, there is currently a large group of stakeholders working to draft legislation that we optimistically think will go through this next legislative session, so that by next fall, hopefully folks can start utilizing ABLE accounts to save money. So there are a lot of things that make it easier and better and necessary for us to move towards employment first. So within the state, we have a lot going on. And we have a lot of people who sat at the table, not just Janet and I. We can't take credit for most of this. We just come to the presentations for the candy. We have advocates who are involved in the process. Folks from Ability 360 have been really involved in the process. It just wasn't called that then. Educators, clearly. Employers, we want more employers than what we currently have, but they are a part of the sitting at the table with us. Employment service provider agencies, which is me, I'm not the only one. There are quite a few of us who've been involved. Family member advocates, who's one of our co-presenters, is a mom and her son just decided she wasn't coming. In all honesty, that's why she's not here. Future current employees, so people who are going to benefit from the Employment First movement. All the state agencies that you put down to an acronym, Department of Ed and RSA and DDD and DHS and any other ones you can think of. They're all there. And the USETs out of NAU and U of A have both been involved. So it's been a broad group that's been working on this for a year and a half now to get everything going. And this kind of justifies why we're doing it. So the purple line are folks served through DDD, and then the green line are people in integrated employment. And there's clearly a large discrepancy, and the purple line's going up and the green line's not. I mean, technically it is, but not in any sort of meaningful sense. So when you look at that, it makes you go, wow, we need to get more people employed. And then this shows you, I know Linda probably does better because she does these slides normally. This shows you our funding in Arizona, and the red part, or it shows you the service utilization, sorry, on the left. And the red part is facility-based and non-work. So that translates to day programs and center-based employment or work centers. And then the blue part is people out in the community. And then the part on the right is what DD spends on those. So in an ideal world, that might be opposite. We would have far more people out integrated into the community, earning money, and far fewer people in the facility-based programs.
But obviously moving money is hard.
Yes.
So, you know, if there's a catch-up always, as we get more blue integrated employment and more of the money goes to them, you know, that's a time frame. So moving that circle, moving the dial, so to speak, so that, you know, we spend our money on what is requested.
Right.
So if that's what they want, then that's what they pay for. So it's kind of a catch-22 kind of a deal.
Absolutely. So as we've gone through our process, so really the point of all this and what we handed out is that we have developed a strategic plan. We're going to explain how we did that and what it is. As we've gone through that process of developing our strategic plan, there are some guiding principles that we followed, and that is that all individuals with disabilities can work. There's a mindset with some people where well, they're not capable of working. Everybody can do something, and we have to start that paradigm shift where we're thinking that way and not tracking people into having limits. We also really believe that the policies and the practices within our state need to support employing individuals with disabilities, and currently they don't. You could see that from the expenditure slide earlier. We currently don't have the policies and service structures that are necessary to make this successful. So we know that that needs to happen. We also believe that everybody has the right to pursue employment opportunities based on their skills and interests. That's a big part of our push, that we need to expand our business base. My agency and a lot of other agencies, we have a lot of folks who work in grocery stores. And a lot of people don't want to work in grocery stores. They want to do other things. So we can't just say, these are the jobs available and be satisfied with that. Part of our effort is to create opportunities in all jobs. Like all of us had at some point in our life when we got to decide what we wanted to do when we grew up. And benefits counseling is a huge part of it, because we, again, I already said this, but that barrier of we don't want to use our benefits, we don't want to use our health insurance, helping people to understand how their benefits are impacted and how most of the time they will be better off by making more money. So those are all things part of what we did. So here's how we did it. Over the past year and a half, we have worked really closely with the community and as many people as we could possibly get to be involved. We've had at least 2 webinars. I know they say 3, so I probably missed one. We've done an online survey where we collected all sorts of information, and we tried to get it to all possible stakeholders. We held community forums all across the state. I'm going to say there were 9 of them. This was last fall or spring. And there was a core group that traveled all around, and there were areas where they had 100 or more people show up. Unfortunately, there were areas where it wasn't as crowded. I know the one in Phoenix I went to was really, really crowded. And they collected comments. We tried to talk about employment first, really in general, and collected comments from all of those folks at those forums. They ended up with over 1,000 comments that were sorted and categorized that went into forming our strategic plan. And since then, the plan was probably finalized in August, I want to say. So since then, we've been out at every possible venue we could reach, giving presentations to people to try to make everybody aware that this is what we're doing and get people to be involved with the process and understand what we're doing. So when we had our community forums, we asked 3 questions of the folks who attended, and that was how we can advance employment first. We're getting everybody's ideas on what's going to make this better. Because even though we have a broad stakeholder group of really intelligent, amazing people, well, a lot of people gave us really good ideas. We couldn't think of everything. We wanted to identify what the current opportunities are within Arizona, what we're already doing right that we need to build on. There's no point in recreating the wheel. And who we needed to get involved in, how they could help. So that was the gist of the forums, and where all those public comments helped direct us in forming our strategic plan. So nice that I have in this notes. So there were a variety of things that we heard. Is it your turn?
Sure.
Okay, we don't want to be
a little while.
So
what we heard for those 3 questions was kind of sorted as Gina said and summarized. So on the question of how can we advance employment first, we talked about we need to set expectations as early as possible. Really in schools, we're talking about transition, and you start asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up question, when kids are really, really little. And so we really should be, kind of starting that conversation in elementary school, in preschool. Educating employers to the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities. We know that that is a great group of individuals that once we get engaged in employment are very loyal. The research is out that you're not going to find more loyal, attendance-driven, employees than if you really get somebody, put the front end in. So educating employers to those benefits, improving the collaboration between school and adult services. We've got to make sure that as schools, when we let go of kids, that somebody else has already got a hold of them, so that there's not that drop in services and kind of an effort not to leave families trying to wade through all of the red tape and bureaucracy of this without having the next set of people in place to pick up those supports. To identify employment trends and where are the jobs that we need to be preparing kids for. Requiring employment assessments and work experiences prior to integrating a non-integrated program. We have in our school district a lot of work experience opportunities for kids to sample different jobs and try different things to find out. Because sometimes I think as we were all growing up, you found a lot of jobs that you were sure you didn't want to do. And that does sometimes move you to jobs that you do want to do because you're like, wow, I do not want to work, doing that kind of a job. And so when we can give kids lots of opportunities to work in different places, they figure out some of those things as we do typically. Providing opportunities for individuals to practice skills in integrated employment settings so that we provide supports in those integrated settings before we back off and make sure that those skills are in place. And then we need to communicate. I mean, how do we advance an initiative that's really not a thing? It's really an idea, and it's a guiding, effort is about communicating, which is what we're trying really hard to be able to do. And then the second question is, that's the third one. Was what opportunities currently exist? So currently schools and DDD work together on coordinated plans. We work with VR in our district. We have a intergovernmental agreement with VR so that those services are being provided to our juniors and seniors while they're still in school. We have supportive employers. The ones we work with do, a great job and want to do more. We have communities of practice on transition, led by ABE, led by a lot of different groups that are trying to bring together, real diverse groups of people to talk about that. Creative employment service providers like the lovely one sitting next to me. National service programs like AmeriCorps. We have effective employment supports and resources through a variety of different places. The DB 101 websites and the things that we put in place so that people can access more and more supports and resources. Supportive CTE programs, career and technical education in the schools, where we make sure that those opportunities are mixed with our students with disabilities, and then summer work, internships, volunteer. We have a program in our district where we hire a lot of our students to work in the summer, and they work in a variety of different departments. They work in transportation alongside the mechanics. They work in the preschool summer school classes. They work in facilities maintenance. They work with the landscaping crews. They work kind of on the whole operations side of the school district, making those partnerships through the school year. They have opportunities to work in those different settings. And then in the summer, many of them are hired and paid to do that work in the summer, and they're paid the same as if we would have hired somebody else to do that job. And then finally, who do we still need to engage? Really everyone is a stakeholder in the true sense of everyone. We want the people that are naturally engaged in this kind of an effort, which are advocates and educators and employers and families and those kinds of people. But we just need to also educate our policymakers, and we need to educate just our general society of, people walking down the street that don't really necessarily have a link to special needs or any of the rest of that, but that you just sort of provide information to everyone so that, you don't know where your next treasure will be, and you don't know where your next great support will be. And that's kind of something we remind ourselves of often in schools, is it's just, you don't know. And some of the things we've done is we've paired students with some of those different operations folks through the district, and then you find these wonderful champions of men and women that work for the school district that all of a sudden are like, we have this woman that works in the district office cafeteria, and she's had different students that have worked with her, and she is the biggest advocate for the kids that come through. I mean, she's gone with them. One gentleman, when he graduated, is working for the school district in another school in their cafeteria. She's gone with them to community job interviews to go really the interview is going to be a little sketchy, but hang in there because he's amazing, and just really trying to coach kids and go that extra mile. And so it's you sort of stumble upon great advocates in the most obscure places at times. And so then when we sorted the comments as well by who gave them, the provider's perspective is a huge one. That's your piece. And you can talk about that. I can talk about it.
And we'll just waymark it.
That's right.
So from the provider's perspective, there are a few things that are important to us. Most providers are on board. I'll be real honest. There are providers who aren't. There are providers who kind of opposed to this, which is interesting. Most of us are really supportive, mainly because for us, and I don't know how many of you have worked with employment providers, we define success by getting someone a job in the community. That is always our goal. No one rewards us for it. No one else. I've never made much of a stink about it. But to us, it happened yesterday where a job coach got so excited because their person got hired and her boss wasn't available, and she called me, and I sent out this big email to everybody saying, hey, she got hired. I mean, she's been working in an enclave for 4 or 5 years. It takes a long time sometimes, but she's hired now. That's our goal. So that's always been important to us and what we celebrate. And this is really an opportunity for us to get everyone else on board to help us to do it. We've been just kind of doing it, and now we're getting to partner with our funding entities to redesign the services to make it even a stronger option for people. So we're pretty excited. We also recognize the time is now with our funding changes that are coming down the road in the next 1 to 5 years, and all of the different things that are happening through the Department of Justice and the Department of Labor. It's happening. We might as well get on board with it because it's going to happen with or without us.
We'd rather they didn't define it
right.
for us.
We'd like to be a part of it. We keep stomping our feet and screaming, and it's being heard. What about choice? We have participants who want to work in facility-based employment. And that really is the best option for them, and we don't want them to lose their ability to decide. The person sitting next to them who probably should be in the community but isn't because mom's too afraid, which happens all the time, because there's scary people in the community and we don't want her to be victimized. This is going to create more opportunities for that person. We're really stomping our feet to say we need to not eliminate choice for the people that we serve. The sub-minimum wage thing is a really big part of the factor. A lot of employment services, even some integrated employment services, are paid at sub-minimum wage. We all have special certificates to do that. And that may go away. Every year it's threat through federal legislation, and it seems to gain momentum every year. And that in and of itself automatically eliminates a lot of choice for people. And we really need resources. We need more employers. We've been going around knocking on employers' doors forever. It's what we do. We're excited because there's going to be more people knocking on employers' doors with us, and maybe we'll have opportunities to incentivize employers, which will make it a little easier for us. And we need funding. If you ever get curious, DDD's rate book is just right on their webpage. You can go look at it and see how they fund services and The more integrated the service, the lower the amount of reimbursement. But for folks to be successful, sometimes they need a lot of support up front, and then we can get them independent. The service structure isn't set up that way, and the funding rates really aren't designed that we can keep our lights on. And we're my agency's a nonprofit, most of the agencies are nonprofits, but we have to keep the lights on. So we just want to be able to support it well, to have good training for our job coaches and the folks out there. And we want it to take time. We don't want to rush into anything, because if we do it too quickly, we are probably going to do it wrong. We want to know that we're doing the right thing for our participants, and we want good training. We want good training for our staff. We want good training for all the providers, and we want everyone working together and having the same view and being a part of it as a team. Now I have all these notes, and I think that's
one of the things I really appreciated in the initial meetings and the initial kind of collecting of the people that are going to, work toward this, kind of toward operationalizing what all of this is that there was a really strong sense of that there's no blame at the table. It's not like, oh, you terrible providers just set this all up. I mean, it's like, it is, we are where we are because that's where we are. When we look back and, historically at education or at just the disability thing over time, it's so quick to remind people that, when we were institutionalizing kids from birth, it was because the people who loved and cared about them the most thought that was the best. Mm-hmm. It wasn't evil, terrible people. It was just the best we knew at that time. And we've gotten smarter since then. So isn't that cool? But it's not really about kind of blaming the system for what it is. It's that we can move it forward. And that was just kind of an exciting piece to be able to, kind of get in the room with people that can believe that. It's like, it doesn't really matter to look back and look for a reason. So that's kind of cool.
Well, I could do Margaret's really quick. Either one of us probably could. We work with families all the time. Again, families are, as the providers were saying, what about choice? They want to know that their child will get to do what they want to do. My child cannot work. I think I alluded to that. We hear that a lot. You probably hear that a lot. I have had kids who I've worked with in a transition program, and they're graduating, and I'm talking with the mom about work, and I wanted to cry. This mom looked at me like, well, he can't work. And it's like, what do you think I've been doing with him for the past 2 years? Yes, he can. Like, why were you sending him here? So that we hear that all the time. They're afraid they're going to lose their benefits. So the benefits counseling piece is huge. They often don't know where to go. Janet said it. It's a huge bureaucratic, convoluted system. Those of us who worked in it for a really long time, we'll leave it at that, often have a hard time, like, who does this? Wait, if I want that, where do I go? So for parents, they really don't have any idea where to go because it's a crazy system. So they need help. Margaret, who normally does this piece, always says, if there were just a simple roadmap, it would help. And Dee Dee does produce a roadmap, but it's multiple pages and not simple. But parents want hope. They want to know the options are out there. It's an exciting idea to them that their kids are going to go out there and work, but they just want to understand how, and they want to be a part of it. Again, they don't want all of us educators and providers and funders making decisions and telling them, hey, this is how it's going to be. They want to be part of the solution as well.
And then my continuing mantra, really from the educators' perspective, is we really have got to educate ourselves about what that entire system is, because many times we're the ones who are guiding families early on as they're getting ready to go toward that. We have those long-term relationships. We have that trust, hopefully, that is, that is moving them forward. And so as educators, whatever we provide to parents initially is probably what they're going to look at. So if we limit the options at the IEP team table to say this is all that's available, then that is really all that's available. They may stumble upon things later and find out, wow, I should have been looking at this instead. But initially, they're going to only know what we tell them. And so I think that really, this piece is really kind of put a heavy weight on our shoulders to say, if we don't educate ourselves about not just our educational system, like what we do when they're in school, but what happens later, then I don't know how, I mean, families are going to find all this. And that's kind of been my message among this wonderful group of people. I kept going like, if we screw this up in schools, they're never going to find any of you. They're never going to find any of you. And so educating ourselves about the available supports and services and making sure that we lay out all of that for parents and help them, sample through some of it so when they leave, they're ready. Promoting and facilitating agency collaboration at the IEP team table. We need the stars and the gompers and the people to be there at the table. We need VR, we need DDD. While we're still in school, we can start building those relationships and hopefully set people up for more success. Encouraging students and their families to plan for employment and really starting when they're really little to say, well, someday they're gonna have a job. Someday we hope everyone's gonna have a job. My children, I sure hope when they graduate from high school are gonna have a job. I mean, that's just kind of, that's the expectation. And so making sure we keep that alive for families all along. There's a great document that ADE put out that's really actually part of career and technical education that really talks about from kindergarten on, aligned to the standards, what are the things that we learn that will lead you toward employment. And it talks about communication and it talks about social skills and all that kind of good stuff. If you have something you're dying to say. I knew you can ask me that. And it's like the framework for employment, K-12 employment or whatever. And it really, it's like in kindergarten, you learn how to, you learn conflict resolution, you learn how to interact with peers, and you learn all of these skills, and really they're all employment skills eventually.
There's the ADE website.
It's not a career and technical education. It's like the framework for employment. I said it last time and I was like, it's like a framework. And then the ADE lady went, yeah, workplace employability skills. There you go.
So it's the same
really close to the framework. Yeah. The framework. It's like, I stumbled on it and I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. Why don't we have this in special ed? We stole it from CTE. It's all good. We don't steal from our friends. So providing diverse work experiences for students as early as possible. Like I said, we've got kids that are working in our school district in a variety of different things, and it's just the beginning of their job sampling. And then connecting and supporting families as they navigate to the next phase of their children's lives, and making sure that families know that they should be reaching back to their education contacts even after they graduate. In our community in Cave Creek, we like to think we're a small community, even though we're attached to Phoenix. We very much have a mentality that we're very rural, which is kind of funny to me, but nonetheless. We have kids, young adults that graduated 2, 3, 4 years ago that come back to the school all the time and say, will you help me rework my resume? I really want to get a job, doing this. I really want to get a job doing this. We don't have any public transit in Cave Creek, so that's a huge barrier for our families. And for our young adults. And sometimes they come back like, I passed the driver's test and I have my driver's license and now I really want to work to this place. Can you help me, rework things and practice interview skills and all that kind of stuff with them? So we really encourage our families after they graduate. It's like, come back if you need us. We're still here. We can still, provide some supports. And so I think that is very helpful. Our families appreciate that. And so as this group's gone forward, we really just came up with the strategic plan and just what, a couple weeks ago, started working toward what are the next action steps now to take. What are we going to start with? Where do we, how do we start doing this now that we've all kind of put the commitment, put the effort into finding out what are the, what do we need to do and what does everybody think we need to do as opposed to a few people guiding that process. I think there's 6 key directions that are listed that we'll go over, and then it'll be time for you to ask all the questions that you've been thinking about. So we can alternate. The first one is really fostering and maintaining collaboration to increase the competitive employment of people with disabilities. I think we know that on the local level, on the state level, there's a lot of work to do, but it's only going to be done if there's a bunch of people working on it together. So collaboration, of course, is always the focus. Our local level efforts toward competitive employment is really those job experiences. We are high school mascot is the Falcon. And so we have Team Falcon that are all of our kids who are working in a variety of different organizations. And I have the pleasure on Tuesday night of presenting again to our governing board. And I get one meeting each year. I focus on a different program. And this year it's on transition and really talking about what are we doing as a local community to make these things happen. And it's amazing. And then at the state level, you know, our friends underneath the Copper Dome are hard people to move sometimes, but we're going to need to go not only to the agencies that are at the table, but also helping move things along from that. And it's only going to happen if there's a bunch of us working on it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us. I happen to have Chris, there's a lot of us.
The key direction number 2 is really increasing awareness of the potential of people with disabilities and advocating for their competitive employment. And I think sending out information around the fact that, you know, sometimes if you get the right person in the right job, they'll be amazing at that job for a long, long time. And I think it was kind of ironic in the schools. I've been, you know, kind of had my soundbite, like if we screw up transition at the end, it just dishonors everything we've been doing since preschool. I mean, we were working on all of this stuff, and then at the end, if you just go home, like, why were we all working so hard? Families and professionals and all these people. I mean, this is the big payoff. This is where we should be measuring our success as educators, is what happens with them when we're done? Like, did we set them up well? And so all these years, you know, it's somewhat ironic. We've been trying to mitigate a lot of the characteristics of their disabilities to make them typical. I have trouble with that word because I have 2 children that don't have a label, but I would never use the word typical for either one of them. And yet, I'm like going, wow, we're in trouble if that's difficult. But at the same time, when we get toward work, it's funny because the very characteristics that we were trying to mitigate are the characteristics that make them perfect for the right job. If you take, we've been doing things with distribution and logistics, which is fancy words for warehousing. But if you take a student with autism who is really routine-based and you teach them right once, they will do it like that every single time. They're not going to be spending hours on break to have a cigarette chat with their friends, find 12 other things. They could work in that job for a long, long time, because once you get settled in something, it's hard to make changes. So they could be the most loyal employee you ever had. And really, they can do very complex tasks as long as they're repetitive. And you can take another student with an intellectual disability or another student with different, and it's like the very things we were trying to like make you flexible. It's like going, no, don't do that, because when we get to the end, this is perfect. The young man that worked in the cafeteria was a young man with autism, and she was like, I have never had portion control so perfect. And she's like, you teach him one flattened scoop of salad, you know, goes here, every one of them is right. She's like going, and she's very funny because she's like, I'm very OCD and I really don't work well in a kitchen with lots of other people. It kind of drives me crazy because I know how I want it and I want it my way and all this stuff. So she's got her own issues and she's going, he's perfect. She's like, he's perfect because he does exactly what I wanted him to do, and it's never wrong. And he stays at it, and he wants to finish tasks before he leaves. And he, you know, it was like all these things, and I'm like going, stuff we've been trying to like beat out of him since he was little. And now we're going like, yay, you're so consistent. And so it's just kind of ironic that it's like now we're excited about those characteristics, because those are what make them so very perfect for so many opportunities. And we find that over and over again. There was a young man, I'll steal John's story because it's just so good, that worked in Scottsdale School District, and in the summer he worked and they have asset control, so you have to go through the big long things to say that yes, we all still have all of these things, and it's not a small task in the Scottsdale School District, which is a huge place. And so there was a woman who in the summer, that was her job, and she said it took me weeks to go through and like, you know, kind of like get all the numbers to match up. And so there's a young man working with her and literally had the stat, you know, of all the things, and he sat all day, you know, went through the whole thing, came back, and he was like, here you go, like to the penny, like exactly right. And she's just going like, this takes me like weeks. And he's looking at her like, what's the big deal? Like, seriously, woman, you're not very smart. Because he's not, yeah, and it's like, and he had the ability to stay hyper-focused to that task all the way to the end, and he knew what he was supposed to do, and it was like not, I mean, a tenth of the time that it had taken anybody else. And then the funny part is he's just kind of looking at her like, seriously, this takes you a week? Like, what's wrong with you, you know? So I think it's those, you know, it's those very characteristics that we identify that when you find the right place for them. There's Project Search is a partner that is also part of the group, and Project Search has a program by which they take a group of young adults with disabilities into a work setting, and they work in different departments. They start in the hospitals. We have some different sites here at University of Arizona Medical Center, at some different places here in the Valley, hotels, the distribution logistics and all of that. But there is a little snippet on one of their like movies of this young woman in Ohio, and she worked for the hospital. She was a young woman with Down syndrome, but what she did is she built all of the medical trays of like all of the scalpels and all the whatevers, you know, for surgery. So she had a picture of it. She had it exactly right every single time. You know, she didn't need to know what this thing does. She just knows that it's this and it goes third from the left or whatever. And so she matched these things up, and she was perfect. They said she had a higher accuracy rate than anybody that had ever worked in that job. And that's an entry-level job. Maybe people didn't stay there long, or a lot of people probably got seriously bored. She was perfect. But she had it in her head that every year she would do more in her shift, and that it was going to correspond to her age. So she's on this thing and she's going, I'm 32 and I can do 32 trays. Next year I'll do 33. And we're like, someone's going to need to tell her along the way. This is going to crash and burn for her. This, you know, it's not going to work really well. But again, a very complex task, but very repetitive and very much can be supported with a picture. And then you don't have to know that this is a whatever the heck all those things are. And you know, you really want the person that puts together your surgical tray when you're the one having surgery with a really high accuracy rate. You don't want them to be like, whoops, we're missing that scalpel. You know, it's like, this is a really important job that, given the right supports and the right training, she'll do that job, you know, exactly the same forever.
And her accommodation was to take a picture. So
Was that she
employers
had to
are
take a-
afraid that an accommodation is going to be like huge.
And
It was
expensive.
a picture. They
No.
probably laminated it to last.
They laminated like a big thing, and she stood there and she tried that, and I'm sure she had memorized it, but she just checked it against the picture that it looked the same. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's like, what was the big whoop, you know? And it was interesting. We have some people. We have a partner of a woman that owns a bunch of McDonald's, and we wanted to see like what happens behind the counter. Very secret stuff. Everything they have there is picture coded for everybody. Everything, it's like above the Big Mac station, it says bottom bun, you know, well, this sauce. I mean, everything is just that way for everyone because it's a good code for everybody. And it doesn't matter if you don't speak English. It doesn't matter if you work there. And you know, it's like they have everything right there of how you put together the Big Mac and where this goes and where that goes. And it was just kind of like, wow, you know, it's already done, you know. And we had 2 kids that worked in McDonald's and worked behind the counter, not your customer service kind of people. Don't want them out chit-chatting with everybody, but boy, you know, they will they were perfect back there. And the accommodations kind of were already there. We were like, oh, look at how cool that is. So anyways, I think that's a big piece. Key direction 3 is, we've talked about, this is really kind of a lot of our work in the school district, preparing youth for competitive employment, including high potential employment sectors and self-employment, and remembering that entrepreneurship is an option for all of us, and some of them really, you know, will be very good at something and they'll start their own business, and that, you know, and that's pretty darn cool too. There was a presentation now quite a few years ago at the transition conference, and there was this young man and he started a kettle corn company, and so he was Poppin' Joe. And so he did kettle corn and bagged it and all this stuff, and he was making money, like money. And he had these pictures,
like $80,000 a year.
And so, yeah, and so they had these pictures of him like skiing in Aspen and on the beach in Hawaii. I'm like, he's living a better life than I am, you know, like going, holy Moses. And really the point being that here's something that he was passionate about. He hired people, interviewed and hired people that worked for his company. He hired somebody to do the books. He hired somebody to do, because he started with his family. They started this business. He was passionate about it. But it was just like such a cool thing. And then you look at, like, I don't know, his quality of life looked pretty darn good from where I was.
His own house, he lived on his own.
Yeah.
His caregivers.
Paid his care, yeah. I mean, so it's kind of like those little nuggets. You go, huh? Well, So entrepreneurship, and we've talked about that in this group a lot. That it's not that integrated employment has a lot of different meanings, and we don't want to pigeonhole it into working in one kind of thing that we have our picture for. Somebody made a good point, like, what if you're the night custodian at a business? You're not working necessarily with people without disabilities or people with disabilities. You might be working alone, but that's still a legitimate job where you're making a legitimate wage. And so we didn't want to get like too roped into one concept. And so entrepreneurship comes up over and over again. In fact, some of our students that are landscaping, somebody told me, there's more landscaping in companies in the Valley than like anywhere else in the world, which would seem logical to me. But a lot of those are individually owned. I know. Well, they landscape. They don't do the grass. But you had something you want to say?
There are 2 bakeries owned by adults with autism.
Yes, there are. You're right.
I've seen that.
I've had the Stuttering King stuff at multiple events in the last 2 months. Wow, it's
And we had a young lady that started kind of out of her home, that one of our graduates, with her mom, and they did take decorating. And so they did particular things for, like, she didn't so much have they took orders like from her home or whatever, but it was like, we had her stuff was like, key direction 4 is really your piece. So you talk about it.
Okay. Foster job creation, hiring, retention, promotion, and self-employment. Again, and I think some of this has been touched on, as providers, our biggest barrier is finding employers, getting our foot in the door. Once our foot's in the door, once our participant's foot is in the door, yeah, they're like, oh, I have to find people with special needs all along. But for some lack of knowledge, means people aren't wanting to participate. And it's almost awful. Providers do this. When you read a newspaper article, like, the CEO of so-and-so's grandson just got diagnosed with autism. We all need to call him because maybe we can get people jobs. And that's legitimately what we do. And it's not efficient, and it's not enough to get everybody jobs who need jobs. So we've strategized a lot about how to provide education to employers. There's an entity in Arizona called Untapped Arizona. And the whole mission is to educate employers about the untapped potential of the workforce of people who have special needs, peer-to-peer mentoring, and a lot of education on our part. And maybe the service structure needs to reflect that educating employers is a part of the service system, because currently it's not. So ways to make it actually work. And policy-wise, are there ways to incentivize employers? Money talks. We know once we get our foot in the door, we're good. If it takes some sort of tax incentive or something to get our foot in the door, whatever it takes, let's make it happen, and then we'll have more people in the workforce.
Department of Labor does have a statistic, 7% of any company, not that 7's that high, but still 7% of any company that gets government contracts and government work is supposed to have 7% of their workforce be people who have disclosed that they're somebody with a disability. So federal contracts, yeah. So it's like, not everybody, but it's a good start.
The state of Arizona does not
have
policy, but that's a good one. That's how to make it. I guess we're on the right side for it.
See, there you go. Policies. Creating and promoting policies that lead to successful employment. Really, like we said at the beginning, some states, had the you never want Department of Justice to come in and tell you how to do your job.
No.
Which is really not a good idea. And so getting in front of all of those kinds of initiatives that we talked about, and really kind of trying to move forward our policies. Right now we're looking at the policies of the different organizations, the VR, the DDD, and everyone's kind of been tasked to go back to your policies and find out if DDD is really incentivizing against integrated employment. And so it's like, how are we going to start doing our own things? And then it really is about whether or not policy at the state legislature can be moved as well. Many states that have employment first started with legislation and it trickled down. In Arizona, that never works. So we are all about grassroots and then hopefully going up. Different ways to different roads to get there, but identifying and communicating the benefits that we've talked about, identifying and addressing policy barriers, what's in place that are getting in our way, researching, proposing, and implementing new policies, incorporating this into state plans and protocols, and then establishing a service delivery model that facilitates transition to competitive employment. So lots of work to be done there.
And there are so many little policy types of changes that can help the people. So for example, we talked about the baking that's gone on. It's because a couple of years ago, the Department of Health changed their rules and made it so you can bake things in your kitchen and sell them. That was against the Department of Health code. And they changed it for this reason, so that individuals with disabilities could increase that. There's probably other reasons too. But they talk
Little
about it
things,
to us.
sometimes little things
Yeah, it makes a difference.
make a difference. And some of it is at our level. And then the last is really the development of employment-focused supports. How can we provide better education for people who have the job of job coach or the title of job coach? How can we provide ongoing and professional development to those who work in the schools, who work in the provider agencies, who work in all these places, so that we're providing appropriate supports. As we know, just like in schools with parent help, just sticking an adult with somebody does not necessarily make anything good happen. It just only happens if that person is knowledgeable and knows what they're doing and can move us ahead to that.
So perhaps we need a certification of credentialing process, which would
be kind of cool.
Right.
And that's all 6 of them. So then the end really is just to say we need you, we need everybody there. I love the fact that they included that Margaret Mead quote at the bottom that is lots of different places, but I think it's particularly true here that never to doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
So we're currently working on our action items, and anyone who wants to be spreading the word, telling people there's extra copies of the strategic plan. Take it, share it. I don't know, is there contact information in here?
I think so. I think that's a very back of it, I think there is.
I don't know if there was some. Oh yeah, Michael's name. So there's an email address on the back page. Format. Yes, and we're hoping to hit a point where we can have a staff person instead of everybody doing it in their spare time. This is what we're doing. It's very, very exciting. Anybody have questions?
Is there a way we can get the slides sent emailed to us?
Will the slides be available?
Yeah, they'll be on the website.
Oh,
Okay, awesome. Has anyone that is providing jobs to individuals with disabilities, have they ever gone and spoken to
This website.
other companies that aren't
that's one of our strategies as employer peer-to-peer mentoring, kind of, and how, because I'm a social worker, so if I walk in, you should hire this person. We don't speak the same language, me and the business community, so it's
Untapped Arizona, as an organization for employers, is trying to do that. They have a business council or whatever, and then they really try to pair people up in common kinds of things to find what are your peer groups. So if you do work for Fry's, go and contact Safeway and contact Batches, and it's like people that speak this, that are as close to them as a peer-to-peer kind of a thing. And so he's really growing that business advisory council, which hopefully will do exactly that. You had a question?
What does your classroom look like? It sounds like it's been very successful in placing students. What sort of curriculum are you using?
Our district is really phenomenal, and I'll say that as a provider. And we work with a lot of districts, and our transition person's awesome. And as from a provider, we love working with districts. What'd you say? A smooth handoff, but we know and
was that I still live, but it's just so good from Ed O'Leary. You said it. I heard it first. Really, that when we're providing services, that we're not throwing the football hoping someone's gonna catch it, but we're in a relay race, not until somebody's on the other end of the baton does somebody let go. And so that analogy really works for me, that we're trying to, you know, all hold on at the same time for that period of time. We have a variety of different ways that we have kids that are doing that part of our transition program. We have a class that teaches a workforce soft skills curriculum that's from the world of work. There's lots of good ones. That's just one of them. But the world of work we use as our kind of our base curriculum, and the kids are in class 1 day a week, and then the other 4 days of the week they're out in the field in those different job opportunities. They work with our landscapers, they work with our facilities maintenance, and they work with transportation and the mechanics is the rotation this year. But we also have kids, bacteria, kids that work in preschool, kids that the copy center has been huge. We took over the copy center at the high school when we lost that person and went like, we'll do it. We'll call it a job work site. And then high school teachers said it was better than what it was before. So high school teachers were never happy about anything. I know, because I was one of them. So they
Mostly with all their providers, all the providers in the geographic area that might serve their kids, they know well.
Thank you very much.
And our emails are both on the whatever
Slide,
slide.
yeah.
I'm Gina and
So
she's Janet. Yeah,
Yeah.
ignore the people who didn't show up.
And what district?
Pardon me?
What district is
Cave Creek.
it?